On the road again.
I
Just
mean,
can't wait to get these bodies on the road again. They're stinking up my garage, and then woo! Oh, I don't know. I haven't come up with the right words, but there you go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Dead Robot Society. I'm Terry Mixon. Joining me, Paul. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing good. Doing fine.
Fine.
Until Friday.
So what have you been up to this last week, buddy?
Writing. That's what I've been doing.
I bet. But writing, because I've heard rumors of things going on at the Cooley household.
You mean like the fact that I have surgery on Friday?
That's right.
Yeah. So they're gonna go in and clean up my meniscus on Friday. So I would. This is going to be a very lovely.
You better wipe your hands down when you're done with that, because that sounds dirty.
It sounds dirty. It probably is gonna be very well. I hope it's very clean, because otherwise that's gonna bring up a whole different set of issues. I got nothing, man. I've got Derelict Trident. I keep calling it Derelict. I've got Trident at 28,000 words now, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it's going very, very fast when day job doesn't interfere. So I'm hopeful that I will have quite a bit of it finished, if not all of it finished, first draft by Balticon. That's still a reachable goal. So I'm cranking on that as quickly as possible. Do what?
You can do it.
I can do it.
You can do it.
I can do it. I will do it. It will be mine. So that's other than waiting for Sever Press to get the, that is for Destruction back to me. That's pretty much the only thing that's going on, besides the fact I'm still stumbling around trying to get Gary's Inferno audio done, but I've got to start recording Destruction very soon. Very, very soon. So
you might not be walking around very much. You could have some recording time.
Yeah, the only problem is I'm gonna have to have my knee propped up, so this is like my diaphragm is gonna be squeezed. I'm gonna sound like absolute garbage, but I sound like absolute garbage now. So what's the difference?
I could just see you now with your knee up doing the recording, and all of a sudden one of the cats jumping on your knee, and you're going, "Oh!" in the middle of the episode.
Yeah, my parents have a 1-story house, and they're actually taking me to the surgery, so I'm going to stay there after the surgery and the next day. I'm staying there because Carrie has to work, and then the other thing is there are concerns about certain animals. So you probably stay there.
Dog knock you off your feet.
All right, you roboted like a son of a bitch. Try again.
Yeah, you probably don't want to have your dog knock you off your feet.
No, or have the cat try and run between my legs, so causing me not to try and step on him and therefore fall over.
Yeah, you kind of need to avoid those sort of things.
Yeah, I can just see if I walk into this house on crutches, he's going to be like clinging to them as I'm walking down the hall. I can see Shadow doing that. I can completely see that. So,
well, we'll hope that your recovery is good.
I'm hoping my recovery is good too, but thank you. I should be down for probably 3 days, and I'm going to be in pain for 8 to 10 weeks. But in 3 months, 3 to 6 months, I should be in good shape.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. What have you been up to?
We're rooting for you.
Thank you.
I've been writing every day. That's pretty good for me. I had about 20,000 words written on the book that I am doing with Glenn. Glenn said, these last 3 chapters, I think we need to go ahead and backtrack a little bit. So we just threw them. I'm starting over a little bit with that. I'm still going to make it by the end of the month.
You're confident you're going to make your deadline?
Yeah. I initially set myself a deadline of the 25th. That would give me 5 days until the deadline that we had actually agreed upon. I had those 5 days extra padding, and it's going to be used.
Cool.
I'll still make it.
Well, I hope so. Otherwise, yeah.
What's he going to do? Start there?
I don't know the intricacies of your contract. I don't know if you have to sacrifice a testicle if you miss your deadline. I don't know what kind of Faustian bargain you've made. There's no telling.
And I shall not say. Dun, dun, dun.
And nor do I want to know. I don't know, and I don't want to know. Whatever strange, tip for tat, quid pro quo thing you've got going on with this guy, I don't want anything to do with
Chosen wisely.
it. For once in my life.
Even a stop clock is right twice a day.
Yeah, so you keep saying. So you're gonna get that done by the end of the month. And you have any plans for after that? Do you know what you're going to write after yet?
I was originally going to go ahead and work the next Humanity Unlimited book, but I'm just not feeling it. I think I'm going to write the next Empire of Bones book and get back to Princess Kelsey.
Okay.
That's striking me as fun. Besides, after the tax bill, I kind of need to write an Empire book.
after my medical bills, I kind of need to write a black book.
Well, there happens to be one on your schedule. That's a coincidence.
Yeah, there is one on my but I need to get Trident. Rocking and rolling, where it will take care of itself, and then I can go back to the black and finish that one up. There's so much to do, so much to set up, and then so much to just let it rip. I just love that part of the writing.
Our schedules are so much chaos.
They are, and for different reasons, and some of the same reasons, actually. I think that there are some stories I would like to write, but I don't know if they're going to be winners or losers, so they're kind of off to the side right now while I get I need to get a couple of Sever Press books out.
I really, really, really want to go ahead and write that urban fantasy novel, but I can't justify it doing it right now. Because I know it's not going to have a big audience. I know it's not, but I want to write it anyway.
You know what I would do is spend like 20 minutes a day on it. Just like, write half of a scene or something every single day. And maybe it will slowly just kind of take shape and form. And then you'll figure out, oh my God, this is actually pretty damn cool. And then everything else will follow behind it.
That's not how I work. I'll start trying to write on it, and then I'll want to write it exclusively. And yeah. I can't let that genie out of the bottle because there's no stuffing it back.
That's kind of why I had to start on quantum personality disorder. I got to the end of like all this setup stuff that I was doing and went, oh God, if I go into this, it's going to be bad. I'm going to be working on this for the next year. I can't afford to do that right now. So it's going to be fits and starts while I get that one going. We'll see.
Yeah. And I want to write the next post-apocalyptic book too. So both of those, they're on my want list, but they're not the highest priority items. I've got to have a different set of priorities when I'm writing. Yeah.
And that's kind of the reality if you're living hand to mouth on the book sales.
If you want to pay the mortgage, you got to pay attention to that kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but it is true in certain cases. So unless you're very, very fortunate.
Unless your name is Stephen King, Nora Roberts, somebody like that.
Right.
Now that would be a heck of a co-authoring team, Stephen King and Nora Roberts. I don't even know what to think about that.
I think they might be a little incompatible, but I could be wrong. They have Stevie write. Stevie writes the romance parts, and she writes the horror parts.
Oh my God. You should write a book about Stephen King and Nora Roberts trapped on a desert island.
No, thank you. No, no, that just sounds like a recipe for disaster. But
oh man. Well, we've got an interesting subject that we want to talk about today, Paul.
We do?
Yes, we do. We'll get into it in a second, but I got to tell you that these two things, stereotypes, archetypes, I'm confused about it. I think I need you to explain things to me.
Well, let me pull out my college PhD, which I do not have, put on my pointy hat, which I do not have, and let's try and figure this one out.
You've got a pointy hat.
Oh, sure.
I know you have one.
I've got one. I've absolutely got one somewhere, maybe.
And let's get to it. So, Paul, a priest, a Scotsman, and an Irish sheep herder meet in a bar.
Am I gonna have to mark this episode as NSFW? Dude, the places my mind went with those three just chosen out of the air items is terrifying. Thanks for that.
And I did. I just chose them out of the air.
Because, you know, the way my brain works, immediately I tried to solve the puzzle, and all the places it led were bad.
The answer that you're looking for,
very bad.
Skip the joke all the way to the end, and the answer is a 2x4 and a 55-gallon drum of KY lube.
Okay. All right. Why did you feel like you had to ask that question or even say that aloud? Is there a point here?
There is a point here. And although I am
please get to it.
although I am very inept at getting to it, I want to talk about stereotypes and archetypes, and perhaps other types as well.
Oh, my Lord.
Everybody says that you've got to be original in your writing of fiction. And I don't know that I really agree with that. You've got to be careful of stereotypes, but I'm not certain that they are necessarily a completely bad thing. And I want to talk about this at greater length with you about this. But I suppose first we need to actually define what stereotypes are and what archetypes are.
All right.
To me, a stereotype is just a one-handed short line of something that seems to have developed culturally to label a large group of people. And usually stereotypes are not that great. Usually they're fairly negative, or they've got negative aspects to them.
The technical definition is a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing.
Close enough.
Yes. I would say you pretty much nailed that.
Whereas an archetype is like a higher level of stereotype. It's like a framework which you can then build other things inside of, to me. So when you've got the archetype of a hero, there's all kinds of heroes that you can build, but they're going to share certain features. There's going to be certain recognizability based on them. So it's not quite the same thing as a stereotype. What does it say is the definition of an archetype?
A very typical example of a certain person or thing.
Those two things sound a lot
like an original that has been imitated. Ooh. Or a recurrent symbol or motif in literature, art, or mythology.
It sounds like a stereotype and an archetype could be very close to the same thing. I find myself doubtful. Please explain.
I think the difference is that, yes, a stereotype has negative connotations, or simplified. An archetype does not have like a single thing to it. If you go back and you look at the strongman in mythology, for instance, do we cite Heracles, also known as Hercules by you uneducated adults out there, and Samson? They're the same thing. They are exactly the same character in many, many, many ways. They have many of the same archetypal properties. So if you go back through mythology and you look at comparisons of which, you can see how these things were, basically traded down. But they do have an archetype. There's always a god of fire. There's always a god of water. There's always a god of anything that helps us, stay around, at least from that. And everything has fallen down from that. Think of your favorite characters. Thor, Marvel. He's got the archetypal properties of a god in traditional sense, at least to the human beings on the planet. That doesn't necessarily mean he is a god, but he's following in the footsteps of that archetype. So there are things that go along like that. Another thing is, think about the gunfighter in the Western. What kind of archetypal properties do they have?
Loner, quiet,
deadly. Yes. And on top of that, usually there's something haunting them. They have problems making connections with people, and they're usually very soft-spoken. That's the archetype that John Wayne followed. That's the archetype Gene Autry followed. That's the Gene Autry. Was that the right guy?
He did that sort of thing. Okay. He wasn't necessarily all that. He did lots of. He was known for westerns, not necessarily being the loner.
Okay. Well, I'm just talking about the gunfighter in general. That role that was played by all those different folks has been in there. It is an archetypal deal. Clint Eastwood's character in
Unforgiven
is that one's complicated. Actually, I do want to talk about that, but let's go for something more simple. The one where he's good God, he was killed by the town, and then he comes back to basically kill the town. I can't remember what that one's called.
It's been a long time since I've seen any of those movies. I couldn't tell you the title.
Anyway, in Stephen King's The Gunslinger, or maybe it's the second book, I don't remember which. He compares all Jake. Yeah, it's the second one. Jake sees Jake, this teenager. No, that's in the first one. Yeah, it's in the first one. Maybe it's the third. Fuck it.
Whatever.
Anyway,
it's one of those books.
The character Jake sees Roland and immediately thinks he walked out of a spaghetti western. A spaghetti western is an archetype.
Is a spaghetti western an actual archetype, or is it a stereotype? Nowadays, you might say it's a stereotype.
I am not really sure about that, because I think, for instance, the Leone movies take everything from all the other westerns and they filter it through the same exact lens, and you have this battle going on there. But Clint Eastwood in those movies, especially the third one, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that is the character. That is the oh God, what's the samurai? Ronin. That is the Ronin gunslinger. And it's all that archetype follows through all these books. It follows through all these movies. There's a lot of stuff that they play with there, but it's all built off that certain level. There's these properties that are just, endemic to those characters, which is why when they break from them, it gets really interesting when they use the archetypal properties and then fracture them. And that is a lot of fun and a good place to play. But a stereotype would be, in the Western parlance, for me, is the town drunk.
Yeah, I could see that. I could totally see that.
Because I'm betting you in probably 30 to 50% of all the Western movies, you've got the town drunk who's in there for about 2 seconds and always serves one of two things. This is a brief moment of comedic relief, or we have to have a town drunk in here, or it's somebody who gets killed by somebody else really fast. But they only always have the same stereotypical deal. Their clothes are messed up. Usually they're in bad shape, poor quality. They look like hell. They're unshaven and basically stumbling around. And of course, massively slurred speech. Because that's exactly what you would think a person who's drunk and who's basically a bum, that's exactly how you see it in your head.
So would you say that if you're using a character that's stereotypical, you're just picking the low-hanging fruit?
I think that's a good way of putting it. I think that is an excellent way of putting it. It doesn't have all the, it has a certain set of properties, but they do not identify in any sense of imagination any details, real details about the person. It's all about the appearance. It has nothing to do about this individual is different from the stereotype because of. And everybody is. We may do some things that are very stereotypical because we can't help it. The stereotypes are there for a reason. They happen. But to try and apply those instances as if they are only committed by black people, white people, brown people, whatever, that is stereotyping, folks.
And we hadn't mentioned that before, although the poor joke entry that I used as a way to bring this in, I didn't use any racial stereotypes in it.
No. But
that tends to be used as shorthand by a lot of writers doing that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny because if you travel enough countries, there's always some other country they pick on.
Ugly American jokes.
Rude Parisian jokes.
Yeah.
Polish jokes. German jokes. Of course, the Germans need to learn have a sense of humor first. Monty Python tried and failed. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the German TV called them up and said, we want you to do some skits for German TV because we have no sense of humor, needed to find one. And so they did. They redid the Lumberjack song, for instance. They redid it in German. It's absolutely hilarious. But the fact is, the Germans are notoriously without humor.
It's that stern face.
Oh boy, Sturm.
Stern face. Like Howard Stern.
Sound like you said Sturm.
I didn't though. So let me jump a little bit there since we're talking about Clint Eastwood. Harry Callahan, stereotype or archetype?
Oh. I think Harry Callahan, if you don't know, we were talking about Dirty Harry, the Dirty Harry films. I would say he started off.
That's a tough one, isn't it?
It is a really tough one. I would say he started off as, well, things are always stereotypical about the movie. In every cop buddy movie or every other cop movie, if you look at it, they've always got a boss who they've got friction with. And there's always something they're trying to butt the system or finding a legal way that keeps them out of it. That's a stereotypical cop show, a stereotypical cop movie.
So is that bad or good though? Since we're talking about how all of these types of movies share those stereotypical sort of things, is that necessarily bad?
Not necessarily, because here's the problem. When we run up against, God, this is going to get complex really freaking fast. Damn it, Terry, I haven't had enough coffee for this. If you look at the genre, okay, I would say that in the popular films, I can't think of a single one where there's a captain or a lieutenant who's not an asshole. I can't think of a single one where the cops themselves are not like, they're on best of terms with their bosses. I can't think of a single one.
I can't think of one either. You've got to have a foil, and the captain makes a good one.
Yes, and the captain makes a good one because it calls the character on their bullshit.
There is, if we're talking books, there is Nora Roberts writes a series under the name J.D. Robb called the In Death series. It's a futuristic cop drama, basically, that she's a lieutenant in the homicide division, and she has a commander that she reports to. He's not her antagonist, but he has to toe the line. He'll back her as much as he can, but there are times where he's a limiting factor for her. That's the only time I think I've seen a police commander above a detective not being an obstruction, but being an ally.
And then getting screwed over because of it.
I've never, not one of the books has had him getting screwed over because of it. He's the barrier between her and the bureaucracy of the city.
Okay. I was just thinking about Justified and the Bosch TV series. I was just thinking about the differences and similarities between the two. It's almost like in those two series, the captain tends to be the captain or lieutenant. I guess this is lieutenant. I don't remember. Seems to be an ally, somebody who really likes him, but knows they have to use the whip to keep him in line before what he does gets her fired. And that sets up some interesting friction as well, because she does things to make sure he can do his job. But there are some times where you can't do that. You have to say, no, you cannot. You have to find another way to do it. And that keeps them from going directly there to 11 to get the thing done. You want that to happen in the last half of the final act.
With the cop dramas, you've got to have obstructions, not just things that the detective doesn't know, but things that keep them from beating their way to the answers.
Yeah, and that's where things get interesting. Is when and several of the books have come out and media properties I can think of. The the character could mow their way through everybody or does mow their way through everybody to find out that they cannot get the answers or what they want by doing that. It's almost like a little morality play in reverse.
Let's look at Altered Carbon.
Mm.
The detective there, her superior officer, and there are some spoilers I'm about to leave here for Altered Carbon, so beware for the next little bit here. Her boss is an obstacle for her, and he has reasons that he is. He's not exactly the most clean, if you know what I mean.
Right.
But he's still sympathetic to her.
Yes.
He's not necessarily completely in the pocket of one camp or the other. He's walking a road in between, and that he ends up being hit by a bus because of it. But yeah, that's the way it rolls.
Well, that's usually how you want to play with corruption anyways. You're getting squeezed one way or the other. That there's one of the great lines in that TV series from a certain character who says, I've done a lot of shitty things in my life, and I'm trying to learn how to not do them. And I like that a lot because it basically says, okay, this has been this person's nature for so long, and they finally realized for whatever reason that they'd gone down the wrong path. And now they have to try another path. And for the moment, the past doesn't matter. It's only the present, what you do now. The horrible, awful things you've done to people in the past, you're not going to do them again. You know, it's an act of contrition. But that's when things get interesting for your characters. That's when things get interesting for third person character, or not third person, tertiary characters, when they have those moments. And they're usually the ones that have it. Villains, not so much. And if they do, sometimes people don't handle it well and it becomes just too damn cheesy or unbelievable. But I think all that stuff is there for you to play with. The obstructions are so much more fun when it's not just killing people, it's doing crazy things. And if you have to kill them, fine, but there should be some fun stuff in between and some interesting drama just between your character and what they're dealing with. You can't write a 200-page gun battle. It's just not going to work.
No, that would... I've read at least one novel that never stopped. It started off running and never had a break, and it was exhausting.
Yeah. I think actually more than just exhausting, it gets boring. It's so repetitive. You get so desensitized to everything that's going on that it just turns into noise.
Yeah, I agree with that. So if we're going to go ahead and take a character that would fit into something that is stereotyped, like a homicide detective, since we're lately talking about that, how do we avoid being the stereotypical homicide detective? Or maybe a better question is, do we need to really worry about avoiding it? As long as we take the stereotype and give it individualistic things that make it an interesting character, is that necessarily a bad thing?
So in my mind, the stereotypical detective is usually unwashed, grumpy, always in need of 3 pots of coffee and 2 things of donuts. They're usually on the verge of being out of shape, just skirting that edge between being out of shape. Their grooming sucks. Their clothes are always rumpled. They're divorced or separated, or they're a widow, and or widower, whatever you want to call it. And they usually have very, very lonely lives and not many friends.
And they're usually pretty abrasive.
And they're very abrasive. That is the stereotypical detective to me. That is the stereotype.
That matches the stereotype that I know of as well. So if I wanted to write a character that was like that, is that necessarily a bad thing as long as I bring it to life and make it my own?
No, I don't think it is. I would urge you to consider some things, like, for instance, he goes home and sings to his cat.
That would be exciting.
Little things like that humanize them.
I think I would want to take and gender swap them if I did that. I would want to go ahead and take a female detective that has all the stereotypical male bad habits. That would be pretty fun.
Wasn't V. Wachowski or somebody like that? Wasn't that one of those characters in some mystery books that was like that?
It could very well be.
I can't remember. Anyway, those are there, and there's absolutely no reason why your detective should have to be male. I would just inject some things that make them unique. Maybe they sit at their office when they're on the phone or anything else, peeling apart and twisting paper clips up into origami.
If I was going to write something that was just totally out there as a homicide detective, I would take something as far away from the stereotype as I could. I would take the stereotype for the what do you call it? The new age aromatherapy massage therapist kind of person, and make that person the homicide detective, and put them amongst a bunch of stereotypical detectives.
Oh God.
Have you thought about trying hot stones? That's so relaxing. You just really should.
Let's see that
bring in candles that are scented of donuts.
See,
this is the type of horror that we could participate.
That is more of a farce than taking, than injecting some kind of weirdness. That makes it a farce. When you jump the shark there, Terry, you've jumped the shark. When you have the decorated detective who always solves his cases walking in with prayer candles over the corpse, and they're actually birthday candles, or they've got one of those little whistle blowers and they're making noises while they're packaging up the corpse, you might have jumped the shark.
Could dress him to the nines, give him a little bow tie.
Yes, and that's what I was talking about. That breaking the stereotype. Nice clothes, always groomed. Ladies or men's person. They're getting laid a lot. They've got a lot of different relationships going on. Their cell is got ringing 4 different ways.
Can't stand the stuff.
Yeah,
coffee. Oh no,
doesn't drink coffee. Things like that. Has never smoked a cigarette in their life. There's all these different things you could have. I know.
Sorry, I can't do this right now. I've got to go to the gym. What?
Yeah, exactly. Harry Bosch always goes home and listens to jazz. He's a massive collector of jazz and knows the genre inside and out and appreciates the music. And whenever he's thinking hard about something, he goes home and he slots the jazz. It's the same way as Sherlock Holmes with his pipe. And those moments are good.
I think that something I said earlier applies. Stereotypes are the low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It is easy to just reach out there and grab a homicide detective that is in the mold of every other homicide detective that you could name off the top of your head. My suggestion, and one that I am not the greatest at following up to this point, is to go ahead and do exactly that. And then look at this character that you're pretending that you're about to start writing and start changing things. Start looking for aspects of the character to make unique. Say, do I want to have these stereotypical things? And if I don't, which ones can I remove or change without so altering the character that it no longer fits its environment?
Right.
Because no matter what you make as far as a character, it still has to fit the story. You can't take someone like your new age aromatherapist detective and put it in a hard-boiled noir story and have it work. It's just not going to happen.
Unless you're writing satire, parody, or a farce.
Yes. But if you're not trying to write those, you can't go too far.
Yeah.
Because stereotypes are still based to some degree in, I don't want to say all of them are based in truth, but there's something behind the detective stereotype that some of those aspects are true to the characters. You can't just change them all and expect your readers to accept it.
And sometimes what I've found, at least from what I've seen, sometimes if you even play with the stereotype, you get in trouble because the readers want the stereotype. That's what they're there for.
Well, there are certain genres where the stereotype is what it is. I mean, look at all the novels you see out there with the bare-chested men.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You are gonna, if you write a romance story and you don't have, the strong virile man, then you are risking alienating a chunk of the audience that's what they want.
Correct. So for instance, if you change that around and you made it a lesbian relationship, that cuts out a certain percentage of your readers immediately. So for 2 women on the cover, that also changes things quite a bit. So and
menage is fine. It seems like male female menage is much more acceptable than with 2 women.
But isn't that erotica? And well, that's a whole nother.
No, it doesn't have to be.
It does
not have to be.
I don't even want to get into this because we'll go off on a completely different tangent where I'll make an ass.
I have a mystery novel, a romantic mystery novel that I had erotica in that I finished, have edited, and have never done anything with because I decided I was not going to be writing erotica. I thought about taking the erotic parts of it out, but the romance is still female, male. And I figured it would be rejected. So it still sits on my hard drive. It probably will still be sitting there 10 years from now.
Nah, somebody will break into your archives and steal that book. It'll be all up on the interwebs.
No doubt.
That's how that's going to work.
But it's hot.
I was also thinking about stereotypes of Space Marines.
Yeah, there are certain stereotypes with those.
And I have gotten on the wrong end of people's expectations of that in several different places in Soul and Beyond so far. And I'm going to continue getting them. If people read that and they've made it through Derelict Saga and they go to the next books, I'm going to hear the same complaints. And I'm okay with it because fuck you. These are my Space Marines. They'll do whatever the fuck I tell them to. And I'll make the society that they're in, not your view. Thank you very much.
I want you to take that exactly as you said it and put it in the front of your book as part of the dedication.
Because fuck you.
Because fuck you.
No, there are certain things that go on. I had one reviewer call my gunnery sergeant stereotypical. And I thought about that for a while. And it made me angry. And then it didn't make me angry. And then it made me angry again. Here's the problem. If you're writing a drill sergeant, what do you immediately think of? Even though you have actually been to boot camp, what do you think of immediately?
Gunny.
Gunny?
You know the guy.
I'm sorry?
Full Metal Jacket. Gunny.
Full Metal Jacket. Okay. He was never they never called him gunnery sergeant. I think he was just drill sergeant.
No, but the guy is referred to as Gunny.
Gotcha.
Actor is referred to as Gunny because he was a gunnery sergeant in the Marines.
Right. Okay. Same thing here. Drill sergeant. Immediately SYC. Now, let me test you on this. What do you think of when I say gunnery sergeant? Do you think of the same guy?
Not specifically, no. I don't have a particular person in mind, but it's usually a younger man of action. The guy that knows everything that's right behind you, making things happen.
Okay. What I see in my head is Clint Eastwood and Heartbreak Ridge.
I could see that.
That is my gunnery sergeant. So that's the archetype that I'm using, is that person. Somebody who's really good at their job, knows every single piece of munition that the Marines have or whatever military group they're with. And then on top of it is also a hard ass. That's what I get.
Sure, I'd buy that.
Okay, so I took that and basically made him as sympathetic as possible when he's not speaking to his Marines. So in other words, he doesn't think the way he talks. And he knows the difference between the two things. And every once in a while, you catch him, his real personality blending in or showing up publicly when it shouldn't. And that's how I try and make that more a character that's more alive than just a stereotype. I try and give that feel to him. Whether or not I succeeded, for some people, obviously I didn't. But I like doing that. And I hope that after Destruction, people are really going to realize just how much they like that character. So that's my plan. But the point is that I have 2 fixed points of reference. You say drill sergeant, I see Full Metal Jacket. You say gunnery sergeant, I see Heartbreak Ridge. Those are stuck in my brain. If I get a gunnery sergeant or a drill sergeant who's nice to their Marines, who's always sympathetic and, patting them on the back or the butt when they screw up and that kind of thing, and not yelling at them and not expecting perfection, it's not going to make any sense. It falls apart immediately, because the role is the role. That's the role they're supposed to play. As far as I'm concerned.
So which archetype do you have? Or you got a story guy coming in one of your stories to be the archetype from Apocalypse Now? I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
No, I do not have one of those. No,
you should.
No, I may play with that at some point. It would not surprise me if I did, because we know that I will throw references into anything and not explain them. And the people who get it, and the others it'll just pass by them without them ever knowing where it came from, which is fine. I love doing that. I love to see how many people are going to pick up on little references that I leave here and there on purpose. But there is a limit to how far you can bend that archetype before it breaks. And you just, people are going to, unless the entire environment changes to something that is unrecognizable or unfamiliar, bending an archetype that far over is going to be a problem. It just is. It has, because readers have expectations.
It's one of the things about writing genre fiction is there are constraints that the readers will allow you to wander around inside and individualize and expand your characters. But if you challenge reader expectations too greatly, you're going to get a backlash.
Sparkling vampires.
And sometimes it's warranted.
I am not going to bash Twilight in this episode.
Stop.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Okay. I haven't tried to completely read one all the way through. I've never attempted it, so I should not speak to that. All right. However, I will say, regardless of how great the writing is, the sparkling vampire bullshit drove probably anybody who was serious about horror away from that book and that series of books, and immediately made them want to lampoon it, because their expectations are that shit ain't right. Those are their expectations are vampires only come out at night, that they're this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. There are just certain parts of the archetype that they expect to be there. So does that make them stereotypical? The stereotypical vampire can't stand light. Stereotypical vampire in my head also looks like Bela freaking Lugosi, just because I'm a child of my time. But how many of our readers and listeners out there would see Angel from Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a stereotypical vampire?
I'm a more of a Spike kind of guy myself.
I love Spike. I loved him when he was evil. Anyway, I loved him
when he was evil and when he was good.
So I loved him. This is a great character through and through. It's an awesome character who's extremely self-aware and doesn't give a shit. That's the worst part. I'm extremely self-aware and I don't give a shit. It's just, yeah, at least there's some great monologues, let me tell you. And that's what makes that character just breathe. It's not just the fact that he's so nasty. He's just like Swearingen in Deadwood, as far as some of the monologues and insights he has about himself as well as the rest of the world around him. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Be that as it may, my point is that archetype remains, but what readers' expectations, listeners' expectations, viewers' expectations, those change to a certain degree over time. And usually it's because some new pieces of popular pop culture has entered into the fray and redefined what that is. Because I doubt many of you hear vampire and think Bela Lugosi, especially among our younger folks. Shit, some of them probably don't even know who that is. Terry does his cape move.
That's right.
So, I mean, what's a Western anymore? I mean, people we have westerns set in space. I mean, if you go to the archetype of Western, there's like there's a few of them. There's like the damsel in distress, right? And we're just leave the gender issues out. I'm just saying what they are.
Let's go ahead before you get into this, into the listing them off. Let's go ahead and just drag in the Western in space. Firefly. Go ahead and fill the stereotypes.
Oh man, you got the captain who's just like the archetypical gunslinger. You've got oh god, what is his name? Baldwin, who's the tough guy. Let's just put it that way, the tough guy. You've got Wash, the pilot, who's more along the lines of the class clown cut up. And that's taking it. When you get into these large groups, you have those roles. So those are the roles that they're filling. And I can't remember Wash's wife's name for the life of me right now. But they all fit together. If you and actually Firefly I wouldn't consider so much a Western as it's more of a naval type situation.
I always considered it like a Western set in the post-Civil War era, just transplanted into space.
Correct. But the roles, you have an engineer that doesn't fit in a Western. I guess that's kind of my point.
I can sort of see that, yeah.
But those roles fall into those typical roles that you see in space opera. I think they all fall into that. The setting, the dialogue, how they talk, how they think, how they walk, the arms they carry, that's only part of what makes it a Western. Most of the episodes follow the Western archetype, which is there's a problem. They get asked to come help out. Basically, it's like, okay, we got a mission. We need some cargo shipped or whatever else. They take it on because they're doing it for money instead of doing it as because they should do it. And then hilarity ensues on their way to carry out that mission. That's how that works. That's the archetypical Western books from Louis L'Amour or whomever else. Zane Grey.
I haven't seen it yet, but it's been on my list of movies to watch since it came out. Was the remake of The Magnificent Seven.
You mean the third remake of The Magnificent
Seven? The most recent remake of The Magnificent Seven that has Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt in it.
Yeah. Okay.
I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard it was really good, but I haven't seen it. So I look forward to seeing all of my stereotypical tropes replayed out again on the screen.
Okay, now let's talk about the stereotypical stuff. Where does this originally come from? Magnificent Seven.
It's from your stereo. No, I'm saying it's from it's Japanese in origin. It's the Seven Samurai. The
Seven Samurai. Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. If you've not seen that, go see it. It's incredible. All the characters are entered into Western archetypes after that. All of the characters. We got the Magnificent Seven out of that was made out of that one. Then we had Battle Beyond the Stars, which was a terrible freaking 80s movie starring John Boy from the Waltons, whose name I forget. Awful freaking movie. Awful. It could have been so good, and they fucked it up. And even at 12, I knew it was bad. Or 11 or 10, whenever the hell I saw that thing. Battle Beyond the Stars followed that. There's another flick that follows that as well that's basically out of there, and I can't remember its name. And now we have a remake of The Magnificent Seven. This constant deal of there's a threat, they round up a bunch of miscreants to go tackle it. Dirty Dozen.
Yeah,
I was more or less the same kind of deal, only they're trying to kill people instead of save them. But it is the same kind of setup where you got a bunch of folks who shouldn't be together or going out to do something. And it works out. It works out really well because you get a lot of tension between the characters. And that's why it's popular, and that's why it makes sense. And that's why people like it. Because the way you can do that. What else, Terry?
Well, we've hit on stereotypes a lot. If we actually want to just use archetypes, how would we do that without sullying ourselves with all the stereotypes that have followed them?
This is a really interesting conversation, and there is a book by Joseph Campbell, who, if you're interested in archetypes, and also Carl Jung, I think Carl Jung actually can be credited with coming up with the term. But I'm not certain about that. Maybe I dreamt it. Anyway, the Jungian archetypes. There we go. Jungian archetypes. He argued that basically the world around us is defined by these roles that have come out of literature, mythology, etc. ad infinitum. They're there because they are the same things that were in the narrative tradition back when people spoke instead of read. You know, you had professional storytellers who would stand up anywhere and do it. But even cave person times, there was probably some way of or some manner of archetypes existing. But those archetypes, if you go read Joseph Campbell and you read Jung, they basically argue that these things are part of us. They're part of what makes humanity. And also we can get into collective unconscious, but I don't think we have time to do that. But and a lot of people will get really pissed off and argue in the Facebook group, which could be fun to watch, but let's not do that now.
I dare you to go ahead and extend this conversation and include that in the Facebook group so that we can see the chaos.
No, I'm not going to go there. Anyway.
All right, listeners, somebody else, you need to take care of that.
So those things are always there, and it's what people some combination of those archetypes is what gives us some of our most favorite characters. Is some combination of those things.
So you can combine archetypes.
Yes, absolutely. You should combine archetypes. I think if you have a single archetype, I think the no matter what you do with the character, if you limit it to that archetype, then you've got issues. You're going to have problems. I don't think the story is going to be very entertaining because it's not going to be very original. The characters are going to be very wooden, because the archetype is a base set of things. It is not the whole thing.
So how do we flesh out, other than combining them, how do we flesh out an archetype to be a character, to be a person?
Well, this is what we talked about. Also, we have quirks. We have little individual things that they do that may be different or flavor the archetype. Obviously, instead of the white chiseled Western gunfighter walking through there and everything else, you could have a fat slob walking through there. Obviously, you can have the beautiful woman. You can have somebody of a race that wouldn't be necessarily expected. Think Kung Fu. You got a Chinese guy walking who looks nothing like a Chinese person.
A white guy playing a Chinese
a white guy playing a Chinese character. I wish Bruce Lee had that part, man. If he had, holy shit. Anyway, the bottom line is you're changing the archetypes by introducing those other facets. In fantasy, you always have an archetype. Oh, I say always. Tolkien followed this. Maybe he set it up, but I don't think so. The hero's journey, the hero's quest, I think it's called The Hero's Journey. Read that book by Joseph Campbell, please. Is basically he fleshes out what all these things are in mythology and literature. That's standard archetypes. You have somebody who's the old wise one who usually sends the characters on their mission. The characters have to discover certain things. There's always a quest item or a quest action that they have to perform. And there's always going to be tragedy along the way into getting there. That's archetypal story in certain instances. It's the archetypal quest story. And Tolkien followed it with aplomb, and that's how everybody knows exactly what that is all the way down the line. So
taking the master-student archetype.
Yeah.
Once you get there, you can never really get away from that one. Because I'm thinking of watching The Last Jedi, and here you've got old and grizzled Luke Skywalker still standing there with his mouth open as Yoda schools him.
and see the Destroyer. You've got Chun and you've got
Remo.
And Chun is basically his Zen Buddhist master and master of fighter, and that's his instructor for all intents and purposes.
Oh my God. Why do they not have something on the internet with the guy doing Yoda doing the voice for Chun and Luke Skywalker doing the voice for Remo? That would be awesome.
Oh my God.
I can only imagine Yoda as Chun. That would be awesome.
Or Chun as Yoda.
Yeah.
Because Chun was always insulting when he did stuff. You move like a pregnant yak.
his fixation. Speaking of Chun, his fixation with soap operas.
Oh yeah,
so defined that character.
Yes,
because it was just it did nothing to help him, but it sure defined that he had his own flaws.
Oh yeah, and his own idiosyncrasies, and that's what I mean. You could have a really hardened character who loves New Kids on the Block. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't you have that?
Oh, let's just go right down to the wire. Nickelback.
One of the funniest scenes in Office Space is when we first meet the character Michael Bolton. And he's got rap, really hardcore rap, just cranked up to 11 in his car. And he's screaming at the top of his lungs with the words. And he's dropping N-bombs everywhere as he's following it. And then a car pulls up with African Americans in it. And he shuts the fuck up, rolls up the windows, turns down the radio. It tells you so much about that person. Just that little scene. And it makes him stand out from the geek nerd life that he lives. And it's so contrary to his appearance because he's wearing white shirt, tie, business formal. And he's as white gets. And he's just cranking out this stuff, and he's got glasses and a whole nerd mystique around him. And it goes against type so much that it just catches you and it makes you laugh.
There is a movie that's coming out that has the comedian Tracy something or another. I can't remember the black comedian's name. I can't remember his last name anyway. And he's getting out of prison after 20 years, and he's going back to his old neighborhood. And you've got this tough gang-looking guy he's talking to. And the guy's just giving him the eye as he's, talking about the neighborhood and how tough it is and all this and the other. And then this girl picks up and he goes, "Oh, hey, girl." Like the street punk character is nothing like that appearance. Total misunderstanding of where that character was based on the appearance.
Right. And that's another way to really build up the setting and everything else. And also give the character the sense of isolation or alienation, which are also archetypes. As Tom Wolfe said, you can't go home again. So there you go. There's so much fun to be had with these areas that they make your writing, they make your stories come alive. And I think that writers need to spend some time allowing themselves to inject those moments. And let the character go where the character needs to go. If you need to dial it back, dial it back. Just play with it. Just have fun with it.
When I started writing Empire Bones, I had an idea of where I wanted to take Princess Kelsey. And when I looked at where I wanted her to end up, I knew that I had to make her at the start of the thing this 5'0", complete non-physical threat to anyone. Kind of isolated, noble girl that her world was going to have to be shaken up like one of those snow globes and set back down. So I kept that in mind when I started writing how she needed to not be, this buff physical woman that already had some competence in those areas. I had to take someone and change them because change is what defines character, not what they start as, but what they become.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a character, Copenhaver in Derelict. I don't know what she's going to turn into. I really don't. But she's bubbly. She's always got a smile on her face, even when shit's just going crazy.
Things will not end well.
Probably not. But she's fun to play with. We never get into her brain. We always see what she's doing around because she has an effect on the other Marines. And I think that if I keep that up with her, keep working to make her a little bit more complex, if something should happen to her, I have a feeling the readers will be pissed, which is what I want because they like that character.
No, I think you've just marked her for death.
Dude, they're all marked for death. Remember, there were only 2 that were supposed to escape this.
And talking about, stereotypes marked for death, there's a movie for you.
Well, any Steven Seagal movie is the same Steven Seagal movie. They're all the same Steven Seagal movie.
Pretty much. Except the later ones where his tailor was losing his mind trying to keep him in one costume.
Oh my God. He looked like the walruses he was trying to protect.
Oh, I shouldn't laugh.
I said it.
I totally shouldn't laugh. But wow. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, okay, certain people age, they put on weight and everything else. That's wonderful and great. But if that happens, I think you have to make certain accommodations to come to reality with the fact that the body type has changed.
Looking at other actors that have had that type of issue, Gil Gerard played Buck Rogers in the TV series back in the 80s. And he's been very clear how he was struggling with his weight the entire time that he was doing it, trying to stay in something that wasn't out of shape and was slim enough to be good enough. And if you look at him now, he after that show anyway, he lost that fight. And he has still to this day struggles with weight as an issue. I don't know what his current status is in that struggle, but he was very open about having to do it and how it affected his Hollywood career.
Yeah, I wondered, now that you say that, I can't think of anything I've ever seen him in but Buck Rogers. I just can't think of a single thing. That's kind of sad. There are certain things you can do with that, though. That's also one of those fun things. If you have a character who is overweight and is still wearing clothes they shouldn't be wearing because they were fashionable at the time, or they're fashionable but they're meant to be worn tight by people with 50 pounds less body weight, that's also kind of a fun place to play. Or you got an attractive person who's always got plumber's crack.
Wow, now that would be an interesting one to do there. That would be an interesting one to parlay the plumber's crack that everyone wants to see as opposed to the not.
Right, but you still have the character be extremely embarrassed by it, that there's no pair of pants in the universe that can hold up their trousers.
And there are any list of memes of people at Walmart that you could use to see inappropriate clothing, maybe would be the right word.
Yeah, so there's stuff like that you can do. There's a lot of stuff like that you could do that breaks and brings texture. It brings texture to the story. It allows you to every once in a while have another character make an offhanded remark about something this character does, your main character does, or wears, or anything else. It sets those things up.
Have you ever read any Janet Ivanovich stories?
No.
The first book in her series, the longest running series that she has, the one that made her name there, is One for the Money. I eventually stopped reading those stories because they became too formulaic. Everything just was repeating. The characters were not growing. I became disinterested. But I got 16, 17 books into it before I finally said, I'm tired of this now.
Good God. That long?
Yeah, they were entertaining, but there comes a point, no matter how entertaining they are, that they become stale. But in any case, if you ever read the first one, my God, the wacky crew of characters that she has in these books is just mind-boggling. There is not a normal person in these stories as a main character. Not just point of view, but the cast of characters supporting the main character. None of them are normal. They are all whacked out in some way or another. And it's just really entertaining to read. I'll have to see if I can, convince you to give that a try and skim through there and look at some of the character description.
Ugh.
Like her cousin Vinny, who runs the bail bonds.
Oh my God. Can you talk about more stereotype there?
And the slimy things that he's known for. Her friend and partner, who's a former prostitute who is stuffed into clothes that are way too small for her. This is why that came to mind. Her grandmother Mazur, who's like in her 90s, that's always getting out and doing things and getting everybody in trouble and gun toting and all of those particular stereotypes. And I think the most amazing stereotype is the car that she ends up driving. There's just this running gag in these stories that her car ends up being totally vaporized by something. And she ends up driving her uncle's old Buick, and the damn thing is indestructible. It's like a tank, and it's completely indestructible. But she's got a real way with taking those stereotypes of those things and making them entertaining. And admittedly, it's meant to be comedic. The shit that happens to her is funny.
Right.
So maybe that helps a little bit.
I think it does. And like I said, I think there are certain things you have to, you can use to break the tension, but you can't go too far. If you go too far, you change. Well, it depends on what you're writing. Again, if you're writing parody satire, man, go swing for the freaking fences. If you're trying to write something that's a little bit more serious, if there's supposed to be drama in there, there's no such thing as a bad dramedy in my mind, but there are certain sharks you shouldn't jump. And I think less is more in this case. With parody satire, more is more. But if you're writing typical science fiction, fantasy, whatnot, typical genre fiction, there is a line that probably shouldn't be crossed. You can cross it, see how it works out for you. I'd love to see how it works, but there are certain things you can't do because they will violate readers' expectations so massively that they will probably be so distracted by that they will not be able to focus on the rest of the story. But that's not to say you shouldn't write it. I'm just telling you, you need to set your expectations. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. Probably.
So could we all. Anything else to add to this before we bring it to a close, man?
Apart from the fact that I always say this, but go to your favorite books and see what they're doing. Next time you read something, pay attention to how these characters are different from their proverbial stereotypes. What roles or archetypes do they fill? Do they do it well? Do they do it poorly? Is there some detail that makes them different from the other characters you've seen in the same kinds of stories? I think it's very helpful to go and look at those things and then kind of incorporate them into your writing. Doesn't mean if you do it long enough, it'll become subconscious. But trust me, you meet enough weird people in your life to steal from them and put those qualities in your characters, which you definitely should do.
All right, man. I wish I had more advice other than just whatever you do, take that character and make it yours.
Yeah.
Don't settle for just leaving it shallow. Take it deep. Give that character a life of its own. Are you going to go and say, phrasing again?
I tried I really tried not to. That doesn't mean I wasn't thinking it.
You are a mess.
I am the stereotype of myself.
Oh my God.
I am what I am, and that's all that I am.
All right, folks. If you can tell us something that we've missed in this, send us an email at show@deadrobotsociety.com. Go ahead and find us on Twitter. Find Paul on Twitter at Paul_E_Cooley. The best place to find all of us is on Facebook at the Listeners of the Dead Robot Society Facebook group. We have to say that we are on Patreon, and we are very grateful to have folks support us on Patreon at patreon.com/DRS podcast. You can find the video episodes of this show on youtube.com/DRS podcast. And we have to thank the good folks at podhoster.com who host all the audio versions of this podcast for your listening pleasure. Paul, who are our $10 supporters?
Well, let's see. This week we have Sue the Cat Yeller, because you can't effing herd cats by whispering. On Manatsu, Tracy Bodine, John Kilgallen, Robert Slade, Devin Lee, Caleb Stinky When Wet James, I don't even want to know, Caleb. Nathan, new entry into the Jelly Gator NATO fan club. Petty, you guys really need to stop this. Drew Redshirt Lives Splatter Bernardi. Chris Jelly Gator NATO fan club president Winder. Isabel Shubidua Cushy. Andre Conde Morass, DJ Chamberlain, Jonathan Zarusin, and J.R. Handley.
Thank you, folks, for supporting us. We deeply appreciate it.
Yes, we do.
And with that, Paul, don't you have something else you should be doing?
Yeah, editing, recording, and writing.
Then why don't we be about it?
Let's do that.
Bye-bye, folks.
Bye.